room, but thank you for all coming. I think I'll say that again. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much for coming to our Neurodivergent Birth Awareness Week session this afternoon with the wonderful Beth, who's going to be talking about reasonable adjustments, how they are a legal requirement, not some sort of nice luxury add-on. So really lovely to see the people coming from the waiting room into the session today. We're recording this to a cloud so that we can then add the session to our new emerging YouTube channel. So if you don't want to have your face on the camera, I don't want to have anything identifiable on the camera, just pop your camera off and please keep your mics on mute as well. I'll do my best to mute anything that comes up during the session. I'm Jo Rees-Davis. For anybody who doesn't know me, I am a co-director of Neurodivergent Birth, focusing on policy and advocacy, and I get the delightful task of introducing Beth today, whom I know from lots of other work that we've done together in the past. And we've also got Victoria White, our amazing founder and CEO, on the call as well. As Beth speaks, you might think that you've got questions or you've got points to make or you've got anything that you want to recommend as a resource or anything else that you want to raise. Please do feel free to put things in the chat. At the end of Beth's speech, there will be some time to ask questions. If you want to and you're brave enough, feel free to come on live, come on camera or mic, whatever you're most comfortable with, and ask your question. But if you're not comfortable with that, that's absolutely fine too. Just pop it in the chat and I can make sure that your question is answered for you. And during this session, please do whatever you need to do to meet your own needs. We're going to be talking for about an hour with Beth, so please move around, get a drink, get some food, whatever you need to do to really feel that you can take in the session and have some deep learning here. So without further ado, Beth Russell is with us today. Beth is a midwife with a master's in advanced midwifery practice and a specialist focus on the legal framework in maternity care. And this includes both equality rights and human rights. Beth is also one of our neurodivergent birth practitioners. So she trains for us at Neurodivergent Birth. And she's also a very experienced legal and midwifery trainer for the charity Birthrights, who focus on human rights in childbirth. Beth is a Make Birth Better champion and also a lecturer at the University of East Anglia. She champions and advocates for the human rights of every woman and birthing person, but especially those who are the most at risk of further harm or marginalisation. But an adjunct part of Beth's work is that she also champions the rights of midwives and all maternity professionals to work in safe and health supporting conditions. And when she's not doing all of that, Beth also provides birth education through her business Birthology, which you see on the slide there. And she is the author of a fantastic birth preparation journal called Growing. I recommend it very highly as a gift if you have friends who are having a baby. And we can certainly link to that in the notes later on. So without further ado, I will hand over to you, Beth, now, and I will keep an eye on the chat. And just a huge thank you for coming along and being here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Jo, and thank you to you and Victoria for having me here today to talk on a topic that I think is really, really important. It's really great to be here. So, without further ado, we're going to be talking today about reasonable adjustments and the fact that these are very much a legal requirement within our maternity system and shouldn't be seen as a luxury add-on in any way. I'll just make sure my slides move. There we are. I don't think I need to really do my introduction because Jo has introduced me in a better way than I ever could myself. So I think the only thing that is perhaps left to say in terms of introduction is in my midwifery work at the moment, I am not working clinically so much, but I work supporting women and birthing people on a birth debrief service, and I also support people making birth choices, and whether that's choices within guidelines, outside guidelines, and I work with people to kind of look at how we can best plan and support them throughout their perinatal journey. So doing that currently within the NHS, and I also do that outside of the NHS with my business Birthology. When I was around 8 weeks postpartum, I finally had my own assessment for ADHD. I'd been waiting for a very long time for that, having identified a number of things throughout my kind of adult life, and actually throughout a lot of it throughout my working life as a midwife, that that was sort of coming up as challenges for me. And so waited for that assessment for a long time and had that diagnosis myself when I was 8 weeks postpartum. And so when I had the opportunity to apply to become an ND Birth Training Practitioner, it felt like my worlds colliding in many ways. This kind of journey I'd been on myself as a mother and as a midwife, and also bringing all of the things that I'd learned in my time working clinically and working with the charity Birthrights as well. So yeah, it feels really great to be here today to talk about this. So to begin with, I thought I'd just take us through what it is that we're going to cover in the session. We're going to talk a little bit about what exactly reasonable adjustments are. It's a term that many of us may hear thrown around quite a lot, but we'll look at actually what they are in the eyes of the law. We'll look at who might need reasonable adjustments and how we can facilitate that. We'll look at the legal framework and some of the key pieces of legislation that give us information on how to protect women and birthing people from discrimination within the maternity services. And then we'll also look at navigating the practice reality, because as many of us know, our maternity services are far from perfect, and sometimes the care that we would like to provide and the support that women and birthing people would like to access is more difficult to access than it should be. And then we'll have time for questions at the end. So please do pop your questions in the chat as we go. Thank you so much to Jo and Victoria for keeping an eye on those, and hopefully we'll have time to answer plenty of those. So first of all, what exactly are reasonable adjustments? Well, essentially they are alterations to care, adaptations to care, which promote equity. So they afford somebody who has a disability and might otherwise be disadvantaged by the maternity system to access the same level of care as their peers who don't have that disability. And I think it's really important that we talk about it in that way, that it is actually the maternity system that is the problem. It's not, women and birthing people who are neurodivergent. It's not their needs that are the problem. It is the system that we have to navigate that kind of creates those barriers and that causes the issues and the challenges. In an ideal world that was truly equitable, we wouldn't need reasonable adjustments, because automatically the care that every woman and birthing person receives would be truly individualised. There would be systems in place to make sure that care is adapted from the very beginning to make it really accessible and really supportive to all women and birthing people. We're far from that reality at the moment, and so reasonable adjustments are very, very much needed. I think it's also really important to recognise that this is intersectional as well. So somebody who is neurodivergent may need a reasonable adjustment because of their, experience of navigating the maternity system. However, if that person also has a physical disability, they may be at more disadvantage to somebody who doesn't have a physical disability, who is also neurodivergent. If that person doesn't speak English as a first language, or is black or brown, or is gender non-conforming, or is in a same-sex relationship, they may face additional barriers and additional challenges. And so I think it's really important that when we think about reasonable adjustments, it's very much about looking at the individual in front of us. I've pictured the fence there because I think we probably, all of us over the years in various training circles, may have seen the image of a fence and somebody being provided with a box or something to help them see over the fence where somebody else doesn't need that box. I've pictured the fence kind of falling down, because I think true equity is if we get rid of that fence altogether, we get rid of those barriers. And to me, the work that neurodivergent birth are doing is a huge part of kind of pushing for a maternity world where that fence disappears altogether, where from the very beginning, women and birthing people are truly supported to have personalised, individualised care. But where we are at the moment, reasonable adjustments are needed, and they're those adaptations to care which promote equity. And throughout this presentation, we're going to be talking more specifically about those adaptations for people who identify as neurodivergent. But I think it's important that we keep in mind the whole person and the other kind of intersectional issues that may be going on for that person that mean that the system poses additional barriers and additional challenges. So what exactly is the legal perspective. We have two pieces of legislation in the UK which are really crucial when it comes to protecting women and birthing people from discrimination. So we have the Equality Act and we have the Human Rights Act as well. So I'll start talking first of all about the Equality Act. So the Equality Act is a piece of legislation which solely exists to enable people with protected characteristics to be protected against discrimination and to be afforded equal opportunities. And within the context of everything we're talking about today, we're thinking about equal opportunities in terms of access and experience of maternity care. Access, experience, and safety within maternity care. So I've listed all of the protected characteristics there. When we're considering being neurodivergent and navigating maternity services, the protected characteristic that we're looking at is disability. And that's crucial because reasonable adjustments are something that are put in place specifically for somebody who has a disability of some kind. Now, many of us who are neurodivergent may not consider ourselves disabled, but whether we do or not, we are entitled to those reasonable adjustments under the Equality Act. Something that I think is really important for all of us to keep in mind, whether we're a neurodivergent person navigating the system or we're somebody supporting somebody who's navigating the system, is that you do not need a diagnosis in order to be afforded reasonable adjustments. There have been a number of pieces of case law, particularly around kind of employment situations, that make it very clear that it's about the impact of whether it's neurodivergence or a mental health condition or whatever it might be, it's about the impact that that has on your ability to navigate that system, your ability to kind of function within the parameters that you're being given by a system. It's about whether you're disabled by that, not whether you sort of formally have a diagnosis of a disability or formally have a diagnosis of ADHD, autism, or whatever it might be. I think that's really important because many people may not want to go down a route of diagnosis, especially when we think about that lens of intersectionality. There are going to be people for whom that system is just not safe and doesn't feel accessible at all. And so holding that with us as we kind of move through this, I think is really important, just so that we know that these legal protections are there for all of us, and it's about the individual, what they need, and the impact that the system is having on them and their unique experience of maternity care. The sort of definition of disability within the Equality Act is that if somebody has a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on their ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. And it's under that kind of element that neurodivergent women and birthing people have protection under this Equality Act. So when we think about that, I think first and foremost, reasonable adjustments are important because they enable women and birthing people to have safer and more fulfilling experiences of maternity care. That's the kind of the first and foremost part of it. But if for any reason for somebody out there that doesn't feel important, it's important because it's the law. Like, it is actually the law. This isn't just something that's, you know, a fluffy nice thing. It is set out in our legislation, and women and birthing people need to be afforded access to they need to be afforded reasonable adjustments to improve their experience navigating the system. I've also included the Human Rights Act here because I think it's helpful to know that there is more than one piece of legislation out there to support us. The Human Rights Act has a number of different articles that mean that every single one of us should be afforded these rights in all walks of life. But when we think about maternity care, there are a few that are a bit more kind of pertinent, such as our right to life, our right to be free from inhuman and degrading treatment, which, when we kind of consider that, it's our right to receive care that protects our dignity. And we also have the right to choice and autonomy. And we have the right to enjoy all of those rights and the others enshrined within this legislation without discrimination. And that's what Article 14 of the Human Rights Act specifically says. It's sort of a piggyback right, and it says we have the right to enjoy all of those other freedoms without discrimination. And where the Equality Act is quite specific about those protected characteristics, the Human Rights Act is quite broad. I've listed there some of the things that are included within that. And the very last one is any other status. So that can be really kind of broad when we consider that. I think something that can be helpful to hold in our mind is, does any other status mean somebody who has previously experienced birth trauma within the maternity services, particularly if that's somebody who is neurodivergent? Is that an additional layer of protection there? It's much more broader, much more broad, and with those two, our legal framework is very, very clear that women and birthing people are legally entitled to care that's personalised and that enables them to feel safe, well supported, and have fulfilling experiences in their maternity journey. Oh, why has it gone straight to number 13? Sorry, I think I've somehow managed to skip. There we are. You can tell we're live. So, reasonable adjustments, when we think about them in clinical practice, they are needed. The adjustments that are needed are going to be really individual based on the person in front of us. So in order to make care genuinely equitable to the person in front of us, we need to really be kind of checking in about what it is that that individual needs, what feels most important to them. And for some women and birthing people, they will know very clearly the things about the maternity system that might pose a challenge for them. Perhaps they're somebody who's previously birthed within the system or has had a lot of interaction with the NHS. Perhaps they're somebody who works within the maternity system and has seen from the inside the many challenges that women and birthing people face. And I would also add that staff often face within the confines of the system. For others, this may be the very first interaction they've ever had with a hospital, with seeing a NHS care professional frequently, with having regular blood pressure checks done, with having more than one blood test in quite a short space of time, with bringing their urine to be dipped, with having ultrasound gel plonked on their belly and their baby listened into. There's all of these things that might be kind of all very new, and they may not know how they're going to feel about those things until they're within that system. And so I think for care providers, it's really important to be aware and sensitive to that this person might be really clear and have lots of knowledge about the parts of the maternity system that may be challenging, or they may not really know at all. And in that sort of situation, we are responsible for kind of giving information to enable that person to prepare for what to expect in the system, and helping them identify the things that might crop up that might be particularly difficult as they're sort of navigating the system. So in order to kind of really dig into this a bit more, I thought it would be helpful to talk through reasonable adjustments in practice in relation to each of the 4 pillars of neurodivergent birth. So sensory processing, communication, executive functioning, and mental health. So we'll look at each of these in turn a bit more specifically. Oh, sorry, I keep doing this. This is because I'm not used to presenting on. Oh, there we are. So
no problem, Beth. It gives us a taste of things to come.
Exactly. Oh, I think it's not a live Zoom call if there aren't a few technical issues and things. So first and foremost, thinking about sensory adjustments. I think a lot of the adjustments that we might consider when it comes to sensory processing are around how can we enable that person to be really regulated and sort of soothed in their nervous system, particularly within environments or circumstances that might throw quite a lot of insults at our sensory world out there. A lot of us will know already what works for us in terms of regulating and soothing our nervous system. So sometimes as sort of healthcare professionals supporting women and birthing people, it's about checking in about what already works for you. We don't need to reinvent the wheel and bring a whole new load of sort of techniques in pregnancy, but it's thinking about what already works for you to help you to feel kind of regulated, calm, and sort of safe in your nervous system. So adjustments often look like helping women and birthing people to identify which parts of maternity care might provide sort of challenges to their sensory environment, and supporting them with practical solutions to minimize or prevent altogether those sensory challenges. So a few of the things we might consider might be, would having earbuds or music playing be a really helpful thing for that person if there's lots of noises? Maybe just kind of earplugs to dampen the noise around, or it may be having a relaxation or a piece of music, or a loved one kind of talking, saying soothing things in their earbuds, so that they are able to kind of stay in that bubble in a situation where, if we think about a antenatal ward, you might be hearing the sounds of another person's baby next door on the CTG monitor. You might be hearing the doo of the call bell going again and again. You might, if it's a combined antenatal and postnatal ward, you might be hearing babies crying a bit further down. You might be hearing people talking with their loved ones, and that's a huge amount of sensory input when we think about, all of the auditory things that are going on there. That's a huge amount. So sometimes just having something to dampen that down can make a really big difference. So that might be a conversation in pregnancy. Have you got already some earbuds, or do you like to kind of listen to music with your headphones in? Or it might be just having available a box of earplugs that people can help themselves to as they enter the ward, or as they're kind of coming in and out of their bed spaces, or going round on the drug round, offering that as part of just your routine. Would that be something that's helpful for you? Because this is something that many neurodivergent women and birthing people find helpful, but actually, somebody who identifies as neurotypical might also find that really helpful. There's no other time in our adult life really where we spend days upon days sometimes sleeping in the same room as people that we've never met, and their babies and their relatives coming in and out. It's a really uncomfortable situation as it is anyway, and so that's going to be a beneficial thing for many people, I think. When we consider the amount of waiting that we sometimes have to do in during pregnancy, birth and postpartum, sort of waiting for appointments, could we consider enabling somebody to wait in a different space? So if the triage waiting room is really busy and there are people, labouring, making, noises as they move through their labouring experience, for a neurodivergent woman or birthing person who is going through that, is it possible for them to come straight into a room, or to wait somewhere where they don't have that same sort of input? And is it possible to make the waiting room, a bit more inviting generally, having the lights a little bit dimmer, not those really bright clinical lights, thinking about having comfortable surfaces for people to rest if they are needing to wait there for long periods of time? It might look like talking to people in pregnancy about the fact that it's absolutely okay, if you're birthing in hospital, feel free to bring in your pillow from home, your blanket that is the material that soothes you, your mug even from home. I don't know about anybody else, but I have a couple of very specific mugs that comfort me quite a lot, they're my go-to. All of these things, sometimes we feel like we need to ask permission. And so if we as healthcare professionals, when we're supporting somebody to navigate the system, can say things like, bring in the things that are going to be helpful for you, whether that's, your pillow, or just even your pillow case that's, made of a cotton that feels really lovely on your skin, rather than the starchy ones that you get in the hospital, whatever it might be. Talking about those things, and if we sort of really guide somebody through the journey that they might be taking in detail, we can kind of help them to identify, oh yeah, that might be tricky. Of course, I'm going to be sleeping in that bed that's not my bed. Actually, maybe I would like to have my own pillowcase, my own blanket, or whatever it might be. If it's possible at all, thinking about arranging a side room if that feels like something that the person wants. And of course, this can be really challenging because often there are not many side rooms available on how the wards are designed. And sometimes it may be that the people that are in those side rooms really genuinely need to be there. You know, maybe they've got they're being barrier nursed because there's a sort of an infectious disease going on or something like that. But sometimes those side rooms are not being used by people who have a real clinical need. So if that's the case, can we enable somebody who does have a clinical need and, let's remember, is legally entitled to a reasonable adjustment? Can we make that happen for them? It can be quite a small thing, but can make a really profound difference to somebody for whom that sensory environment of being in a bay is truly intolerable. I think if it was a physical thing going on, often people respond to that much more readily. But actually, just because you can't see it doesn't mean that that person isn't really suffering, like perhaps actually in pain because of what is going on in that environment. And so just because we maybe haven't experienced that ourselves, I think it's really important to really try and listen to women and birthing people when they're telling us about what might be difficult about the environment for them. So I mentioned before about the ultrasound gel. Thinking about, this is something, Victoria, you really got me to think about when I did the training with you, that for some people it might be fine having that ultrasound gel, but putting it on yourself and being able to wipe it off yourself can be just a really small change that makes a massive difference to how that sensory experience feels for that woman or birthing person. And that's a really small thing that we can do, that we kind of ask the question about. Um, Supporting the woman or birthing person to keep the room a temperature that feels comfortable. I think many of us that have navigated maternity services or work within them know that wards, birthing rooms are often way hotter than we would like them to be. So thinking about, can we provide like some cool flannels for this woman or birthing person? Can we, if they are for whatever reason needing to be in a bay, could we provide them the space that's by the window so that they can open the window and have some fresh air? Thinking about props and things to enable freedom of movement, for many people that is a really beneficial way of staying regulated, be that in the pregnancy, postpartum, or during birth itself. So providing things that enable that freedom of movement, and just having conversations around, you don't need permission to move the bed. If the bed isn't the center of attention in the room, you don't need permission to move that bed against the wall and, you know, move how you need to in your birth. um Thinking about as well, if somebody is postpartum and feeding baby for long periods of time and struggling with having to be still for long periods of time, thinking about supporting them with carriers and things like that. You know, I know that that may not be within all of our sort of sphere of practice, but just sort of talking through with them things that might help them when they are needing to move, needing to do something for them, yet what their baby requires of them is perhaps staying still for long periods of time. And by talking about what you might expect, and also saying, you know, we you may anticipate one thing to be challenging and actually it doesn't pose a challenge at all. But actually, if we think about what that maternity journey looks like and the intricacies of what happens when you come in for an antenatal appointment, if you're having an induction of labour, what does that actually look like? How long might you be waiting for? What is the kind of process that happens, and who might you expect to see? How what's the usual process of things? Then that individual, because we can't possibly know the intricacies of every single individual that comes, you know, through our doors, but we are, if we're working within the system, experts in what happens in that place. So we can talk through, this is the usual, this is what often happens. How does that feel to you? How does that sound to you? Is there anything that I've talked about there that you can identify might be challenging, and how could we change that? How could we make that a little bit more manageable? How could we make that more supportive? um, so that's sensory processing, and thinking about some adjustments that we could make to the sensory environment in order to make the experience less of a sensory onslaught and more of a supportive journey for that woman or birthing person. Next, thinking about communication. We have to communicate so much in pregnancy, sometimes more than we might ever have in our journey through adult life so far. There's the initial thing of figuring out, who do I tell that I'm pregnant? How do I access the people that I need to access. Is that a phone call? Is that filling in an online form? How do I feel about making a phone call and talking about this thing that, at the moment feels way off in the future and like my whole world is changing, you know, um, right through to, you get the letter through from the health visitor saying, I'm going to come round and see you on this day. Please wait in from this time till this time. You get text messages with different appointments. You get letters with other appointments for going up to your scans. And then when you're actually accessing and navigating that care, you are speaking to the person on reception. And then you're speaking to the person that does your blood pressure and checks your wee. And then you're going in to see the sonographer. And then you're coming back out and you're waiting. And then maybe you have to see a consultant and you see one doctor, but then actually there's something that comes up and they're not sure about and they want to get another doctor. There's so many people that you have to interact with and so many systems that can feel really, really overwhelming. So I thought we could just think about a few of the things that might help for some women and birthing people as they're navigating this very imperfect system that we have. And as with sensory processing, this isn't going to be the same for everybody. Each of our communication needs are as unique as each of us as individuals. And so these are some ideas, these are some thoughts, but the expert in what's going to be the right level of communication and what's going to be most helpful is the woman or birthing person in front of us. Something that I think can be really helpful is being able to record appointments, and women and birthing people have the legal right to record their appointment with or without the healthcare professional's permission. Obviously, the ideal is that you can have a conversation about it and say, yeah, like, is that going to be helpful for you? Let's do that, so that, let's record a voice note so that you can listen back to this, or, let's do a video so that you can watch this back. And I think for some healthcare professionals that can feel a bit confronting because you're thinking, oh, I don't want to say anything silly, like what if I say something slightly wrong. We're all human and we all have our ways of talking around things, and I think we need to reflect that if we are uncomfortable, then is there something about how we're speaking or what we're doing that we are ashamed of somehow, or should have some concern over? We should all be able to communicate in a way that we would be happy for anyone to hear that we have spoken in that way. But I think it does throw up a bit of discomfort. Um, but it can be a really helpful communication tool for women and birthing people, because in those relatively short appointments, we give so much information. And to us, as people working in that system, it might be fairly routine, everyday information. But for someone who's never accessed that before, that can be utterly overwhelming. And I don't think any of us can remember everything that we've said when we've been into an appointment, that particularly if perhaps we're nervous about it or we've got lots of questions, and it's really hard to keep track of all that information. So that can be a really helpful thing to be able to offer women and birthing people, I think. For some, talking on the phone might feel really uncomfortable or really difficult. I remember during COVID, we had to do lots of booking appointments over the phone, and it was really difficult because you get so much from being in a room with somebody. And as a midwife, I felt that I was always better able to kind of reassure people about these very in-depth, sometimes unnerving questions that I'm asking about their life. And at that, I remember that being a time that was quite challenging. And so for somebody who doesn't enjoy phone calls or finds them very overwhelming, finds them challenging, thinking about, are there other ways that we can communicate? Can we make sure that we prioritise face-to-face appointments? I think in most places we are mostly back to face-to-face appointments. Sometimes video calls are still offered in some places, but if somebody that doesn't work for them, then let's make sure we prioritise face-to-face. Equally, if somebody feels more comfortable with the video appointment because of what they've got going on in their life, or actually kind of getting up to the hospital is difficult and they feel more comfortable with a video appointment or phone call, let's prioritise that. It's about the individual. But for some people, they may prefer sort of email or text communication. In the role that I do at the moment, when I'm arranging appointments with people, sometimes I've come across people who I can't ever get to them on the phone, and then I send an email and they say, oh yeah, no, I just feel really uncomfortable ever answering a phone call that comes from an unknown number. And of course, from the hospital, it always comes as an unknown number. And so once I know that, I can put a little note to say email communication as much as possible, and that's what we do. And so I think just asking about what that individual feels that they need is email. In some places they'll use text. So thinking about what's right for the individual. Avoiding filler words, and this is something that I consistently have to work on. I have probably said many, many, many times already in this session so far. But as far as we can, really being conscious of the words that we're using, being clear, concise, and factual in our language, avoiding using sort of jokes. I've just done it there, sort of, avoiding using those filler words as much as we possibly can so that the information that the person is needing to take in is as it is. We're not saying lots of additional things. It's a very British thing to use lots of words to say one thing, and I am hugely guilty of it and constantly reflecting and trying to improve that about the way I communicate. I think it's just a helpful thing for us all to be aware of, that can be really difficult. We're not going to get it right every time, but let's try. Providing a written summary of the appointment afterwards can be a really beneficial thing for some women and birthing people, where one person may prefer to have like a recording of the appointment. Another may prefer that after we've talked everything through, that's put in a kind of bullet pointed summary and sent to them. The way that I have navigated that in my current role is I have to write up the conversations that I have when I facilitate a birth debrief. I always write a summary of our conversation as my record keeping. So I say, is that something that it would be helpful for you to have access to? I'm very happy to send you that if it would be helpful. I hope that as we move to a more digital system, that might become more commonplace, that the records that healthcare professionals are writing can be something that women and birthing people can access on their phones. Where I am at the moment, that's not the case. I know that in some parts of the country it is, but that for some people can be really helpful to have a formal written out. This is what we talked about. This is what I said. This is what I heard that you felt was important to you. And this is our plan from here. And then that can be revisited each time. Making extra time available whenever that's possible so that explanations can be really full and questions can be answered properly. When we think about those sort of really full explanations, the level of detail that each person needs will depend on them as an individual. But if somebody requires lots of detail to enable them to feel a sense of control and safety in the experience, let's make sure that that happens. Let's remember that's something that we are legally required to offer. So for us as people working within the system, if we've got very short appointment slots and we're being told we can't offer more than that, this legal framework is a tool for us so that we can actually provide the level of care that we came into this job to provide. So we can go to our senior leadership and say, I'm hearing that you've said to me that I can't book double appointments like I did there. Can I just come back to you to let you know that I am required to do this by law because this person has made it clear that having additional time for full explanations is wholly necessary for them. It's not just a thing that they might find nice to have. This is what they require in order to feel safe, in order to be able to access the same level of care as somebody who doesn't require that kind of level of detail, level of explanation. It would be, coming back to what we said at the beginning, in an ideal world, we would be able to afford that to every single woman or birthing person, that the length of appointments would be much more tailored to the individual. But where we have women and birthing people who very clearly need extra time to be able to take that information on board, ask the questions that they need to ask, and then make any decisions they need to make, the law enables us to provide that, and we can use that as a way to kind of escalate to our senior leadership. I've said there, explain processes of appointments, induction of labour, birth, cesarean, whatever it might be, in lots of, in as much detail as possible. And I think that is true of all of the pillars, that it can be really helpful to talk about those things so that people can consider their needs in relation to whichever pathway it might be that they are about to kind of go down, whether that's, oh, I'm going to go for my dating scan. What's that actually going to be like? Where do I wait and who will I speak to, and talking through those things. I've put consider the time of day for appointment. There's a few things there that I think it's worth considering. So something that when I was a community midwife, I was notorious for like overrunning and I would try my best to keep to time on appointments, but um, there often was far more to fit into the appointment than there was time enabled for. So if there was somebody that for them, if their appointment wasn't at the time that it was planned to be, that was going to be really distressing, we could perhaps have a conversation about, should I book you first thing? So there's no, of course, it's my responsibility to try and make sure that I stay on time with my clinic, but knowing the system and the imperfections that there are, that can be a helpful way around it. So let's book you first of the day, so it's much less likely that your appointment is not going to be at the time that we've said it's going to be at. Or another thing that I sometimes would do if I knew that somebody perhaps needed a bit of a longer appointment would be to book them at the very end of the day, because I knew if I overran and was kind of going into, I mean, this is not something I would advocate doing, but at the time, if I was going to go into my time a little bit, but it meant I could give the time I felt I needed to, then I was sort of happy to do that. But I think it's really important that we, as much as possible, don't feel the need to do that. We should be supported by the systems around us to give people the length of time appointments that they require. And also just, I think, considering what time of day works best for that individual. So for some people, they will find they can focus far more and take information in better in the morning. For others, that will be in the afternoon. So just really trying to be flexible around the individual that we're supporting around their needs. Next, we come on to executive functioning. So again, this is another place where I think the perinatal period is full of demands on our executive functioning, from keeping track of all the appointments that we might need to attend. And for some people, those appointments may not be huge in number, but for other people, they may have appointments with their community midwife, and they might be having regular scans, they might be seeing a pelvic health physiotherapist, they might be seeing a mental health practitioner, they might be seeing their consultant obstetrician, they might have other specialists that they need to see for other health conditions, that they need specialist input in pregnancy. And when those appointments add up and you're trying to juggle those many appointments, that is a huge demand on executive functioning. When we think about baby care and trying to take care of all the needs of a tiny newborn baby, I don't think until from being a midwife, I remember seeing how busy that time was and then experiencing it myself and thinking, oh my goodness me, it's 5 o'clock and I feel like I've done nothing and yet I haven't stopped. And the demands of a newborn can be huge on our executive functioning, and often we are prioritizing our baby and we forget to look after ourselves, or we do look after ourselves and suddenly realize, oh no, I've missed this, I was going to do this at that time and I haven't done it. Oh, and I feel that I've dropped the ball there. And that can be incredibly difficult. So these are just a few ways that I think we can support women and birthing people with executive functioning when it comes to the kind of perinatal time. And as with all things, this will be about what's right for the individual in front of us. So once again, talking through how maternity care and its many systems work, so that people can look at that and think, oh yeah, that might be difficult for me. This is what I'm going to do to try and ease that. Writing down appointment times, I mean, that's often kind of common practice anyway, but if it's not, then just making sure that if somebody has made it clear that this might be something that's difficult for them, making sure that they're written down, and if possible, sending appointment reminders, having a system in place where that kind of pops up the day before or a little while before, so that there's that kind of jog of the memory. Providing written or video instructions alongside any verbal information that's given. So an example of this that might be helpful might be for somebody who is learning to breastfeed their baby, and perhaps as a midwife I've gone round and I've provided some support with positioning and attachment and sort of showed them what it looks like when baby's swallowing and how they can be kind of satisfied that baby is feeding effectively. Maybe whilst I'm doing that, I could ask them if they want me to video on their phone so that they can look back on that and they can see all of the things that I've pointed out. So it's, if for that person watching something or listening to something back works better than having something written down, then I think that can be a kind of great way to enable them to keep looking over that information and checking in to make sure, yeah, I feel that all of those things that we talked about, they are happening. Um, Something that I think when it comes to kind of infant feeding, obviously when you're providing that postnatal care, sometimes it's incredibly busy and you've got many people that you're due to see. I think coming back to the fact that these reasonable adjustments are a legal requirement and taking the time to make sure that you've really, if somebody's baby is on a feeding plan of some sort, that you've actually really worked out their feeding requirements. If they're having top-ups of express breast milk or formula milk, making sure that you have looked for each of the days ahead how those requirements are going to increase, and given them some ideas of what that might look like in practice, what taking 450 mils over 24 hours, what that might look like in terms of what each bottle looks like. I think sometimes we can do the thing of saying, oh yeah, so a baby would have this many mils per kilogram in 24 hours and leave that with the family because of that sense of being busy and needing to rush in and rush out. But that might be really prohibitive for that woman or birthing person. It might mean that that's just like one more thing that they can't do that could really negatively impact on their feeding journey, on their mental health and well-being. And so just, really taking the time to make sure that we're doing things like that. Checking in about whether home visits or clinic appointments feel preferable. For some people, they will prefer to have like a set time that they come, they have their appointment and they go. For other people, coming, all of the challenges that come with like having to find the place, get to the park, get to the place, or navigate public transport, get to the place that they then need to be within the building to have the appointment, waiting for the appointment, and then going into like to do that in a clinic room space might be really difficult, and there's like lots of layers to that. So if it's possible to offer home visits, thinking about offering home visits, particularly in the postpartum period. Another really simple one is just enabling people to visit the labour ward or the birth centre during the pregnancy so that they can do a bit of a practice run of, this is where I park, these are the stairs that I might go up, this is what that all feels like. And then also considering what that might be like out of hours. So if there are doors that are locked at certain times of the day or night during just making sure that they've been given, like, this would be your route A on a day, this would be your route B if it was past 7 o'clock in the evening or whatever it might be, just so that they have a plan of action of how they're going to get to the hospital, what that feels like, what the environment is like once they get there. And that's I think a relatively easy thing for us to facilitate during pregnancy. Perhaps using maps or videos and clear written instructions to support with all of that. I think as well, something that is really important around executive functioning is trying to be non-judgmental. If what that person is experiencing is something that we don't experience challenges with ourselves, it can be easy to kind of dismiss those concerns or think, oh, like you'll be fine. Why do you need to know like all of that detail? Or perhaps somebody running late for an appointment and not being met with, it's absolutely okay, like please don't worry, take a minute for yourself. There's already enough kind of shame, I think, associated with having challenges with executive functioning as as adults navigating this world. So as much as we possibly can, just making sure that we're not adding to that in the way that we're supporting somebody is really crucial, I feel. And again, these are just a few of the things, and there may be any number more adjustments that we could make, and that will be based on the individual in front of us. And then we come to mental health. So we know that neurodivergent women and birthing people are more likely than the general population to experience mental health difficulties. And the perinatal time is a really vulnerable time for mental health. So a few things that we could consider putting in place and support somebody with as they're navigating their perinatal journey would be prioritising continuity of care. So this is something that many trusts in the UK, unfortunately, now don't provide routinely. But remembering that this is a legal requirement, remembering that neurodivergent women and birthing people are legally entitled to reasonable adjustments, could we make sure that this person experiences continuity of care? And that may be with a specialist midwife. There may be a midwife who is a specialist in perinatal mental health that they can see regularly, and they will be their sort of continuity person throughout the perinatal period. It may be just, even if the model of care is not one of continuity, making sure that that person, as far as reasonably possible, is always booked in to see the same midwife and doesn't experience the challenge that many experience of being booked in with a different midwife for every appointment. Of course, every now and then there may be sickness, there may be holiday and a date where there's a different person, but just really making the effort to ensure that that happens if it's not common in how the system is currently functioning. Providing an additional appointment for birth planning and sort of perinatal planning as well. So that's something that in my role at the moment I can do. So community midwives can refer women and birthing people to me, so we can just sit down together and take a bit longer to really talk through perhaps previous difficult experiences or things about their experience of navigating NHS systems generally, and how we can best support them in kind of putting a plan in place that's attached to their record, that then any care professional that they see can have a read through of, these are the important things to know about me, and these are the ways that I need to be supported when I'm accessing maternity care. I think throughout the perinatal period, there's a lot of times where it can feel like we don't have a lot of control. So finding ways that we can support women and birthing people to have autonomy and control as much as possible. It can feel like quite an overwhelming experience, having your body change in these ways that it's perhaps never done before, and supporting people with the things that they can control. So thinking about bits around birth planning, around bringing things in from home, around ways that they can support their nervous system and regulate their nervous system that they can keep within their control, and also holding space for just how hard it is to consider relinquishing that control to a certain extent as our body goes into labour, if that person's choosing a physiological labour, if somebody's choosing to have a cesarean, just how difficult it is in that early part afterwards where you can't move your body as easily, and as you recover, the things that you could do with your body you now can't do in the same way. And supporting people's autonomy by ensuring that they are made aware of the choices available to them and are genuinely supported in those choices, whether or not they align with what the hospital or the institution recommends or wants for that person to choose, making sure that they genuinely have choice and autonomy and are supported in that as far as reasonably possible. Giving people additional time wherever possible and wherever that woman or birthing person feels that it's needed, whether that's for additional explanation or for holding space for difficult emotions that are coming up as a result of navigating this really huge time in life. Enabling them to have more than one birth partner. I think in many places this is fairly standard now. Perhaps the exception to that is in caesarean births, but looking at, if this person has a real need to have their say their romantic partner and also another loved one, their mother or a doula or a sister or a friend with them, because their perhaps romantic partner is their support person for some things, but this other support person is able to hold them and support them better with other things. Actually, can we make an exception? Can we enable for them to have the support of both of those people in the way that they need to? Remembering again that this is a legal requirement and it is something that women and birthing people, unless there is a really genuinely proportionate reason as to why we can't facilitate and support that this is a legal requirement. Supporting that nervous system regulation as far as reasonably possible through all the way throughout that journey, and just really looking at what that individual needs. I think particularly thinking about as well for women and birthing people who experience shutdowns or meltdowns, thinking about how we can support them to best minimize the chance of that happening and support them to feel safe as if that does happen, and how we can best help them to kind of come out that and feel, safe and supported within that. And really, really crucial, I think, is avoiding putting any pressure on a woman or birthing person to make decisions if they are in a state of shutdown or meltdown, because there would be questions there around how valid that consent is, and just really making sure that that person is given all of the resources to be in a place mentally and emotionally where they can make those really important decisions about their perinatal journey. So, as I said before, these are just a few of the ways that we might consider under each of these pillars how to best support women and birthing people. Um, Neurodivergent Birth have an amazing toolkit. I would really encourage any of you that are working with women and birthing people who are neurodivergent or working in clinical areas where you may be supporting neurodivergent women and birthing people to print this, have lots of copies so that you can give it to women and birthing people, and also use it as a prompt to check in about, some of the things that may pose challenges within our system. Um, any questions? Sorry, Jo, I don't know how I'm doing for time. I didn't have a clock up to
You're
check.
doing fantastic for time. Beth, thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. Such a wealth of information, knowledge, and so, so helpful to have the legal framework set out so clearly for us. Got another 5 minutes or so, as long as you're okay to stay for that. We
Yeah.
don't have too many questions in the chat at this stage, but if people want to put them in, please do feel free. There's also been a good question from Valentina. Is info@ndbirth.com the correct email to contact us at ND Birth with any feedback or any questions that perhaps come up over the next few days? And that is indeed the correct email for anybody watching this later on in time or anybody listening now. I've just seen that there might be another question in the chat. If not, I have some ideas of questions too. Lisa has asked, in terms of neurodivergent women and birthing people are more likely than the general population to experience mental health difficulties and may be vulnerable during the perinatal period. Do you have any good references or analytics to support that, Beth?
So, what in terms of a sort of research paper?
Yes, yes.
So not to hand at the moment, but I'm sure it's something that as an organisation with Neurodivergent Birth we have, because it's as part of our training, the full Neurodivergent Birth training that we provide. There's a whole section on mental health, and so I think yes, we will have that somewhere. I don't have it to hand just right now, but there is evidence that demonstrates that. Yeah.
Very much agree, Beth. And I know you were on the session yesterday as well, Lisa. The maternity autism research group would be the first people I would contact when I was looking for research and evidence. They have such a wealth of evidence and resources on their website, and they are incredibly all over the material in this domain. And I think they mentioned on their session yesterday that about 70% of any work that's been happening in terms of neurodivergence and maternity care, somebody from the maternity autism research group has peer reviewed it. So that's really amazing, and it will be there. But very happy to find that for you later on in time if you want to contact us, Lisa, after this session as well. I had two questions floating around in my mind, Beth, that I thought maybe would be the sort of questions people listening to the session now or later in time might think about. And the first one would be, if somebody said, well, I went along to my initial antenatal appointment, I'd listened to your session, Beth, it was very helpful. I took the neurodivergent birth toolkit with me, but unfortunately, I met with quite a dismissive attitude from a healthcare provider who said, look, I'm sorry, we're just so short-staffed at the moment. In order to treat everybody equitably, we have to treat everyone the same, and you can't have that. What steps can that person take to sort of escalate their problem and try and pursue that a bit further?
So I would say that using the legal framework, using some of this information to kind of put down in writing, look, this is what I was met with, this is what I know I'm legally entitled to, how can you help me to access it? So in my current role, if somebody is having difficulty accessing the level of care that they require or has been sort of dissatisfied with the care that they've received, normally they will contact PALS, the Patient Advice and Liaison Service, and PALS will contact me, and then I can make contact with them and we can put things in place to make sure that their needs are met and that they're supported. Because whilst from that example that you've said, Jo, it sounds as though that healthcare professional is feeling very stressed, very overwhelmed, there's lots going on there. It sounds like that practitioner perhaps has lost that bit of kind of critical thought almost of like, this person's coming to me with something, and that takes quite a lot, I think, to ask for some of these things. They've lost sight of that and lost sight of the impact that that might then have on that person, because for some people that will be the one interaction that they then are like, well, I can't engage with this service because I was made to feel like my needs weren't important. I was made to feel that I wasn't going to be listened to. So I would say for that person, having that validation from the legal framework, from organisations like Neurodivergent Birth, that this is something that you are legally entitled to. You deserve to be treated with respect and to be well supported in your choices. And it's not acceptable to be met with that sort of attitude. So I would say contacting Patient Advice and Liaison Service, putting out in writing, these are my concerns. And if that's somebody that struggles to kind of put that in writing, seeing if there is a loved one that will put that down in writing for them, asking to see a different midwife next time, and perhaps asking them for support if they haven't got somebody else around them that will support, asking them for support to say, like, look, could this be fed back about this person, because that made me feel, that really affected me, and I want to make sure that doesn't happen again, so that can be followed up.
That's absolutely brilliant, Beth. Thank you so much. In many ways, you've answered the second question I was going to ask in that really full answer there, but I'll put it out there anyway, because it's something that I personally, I know many other people have been in the position of thinking about. Let's say we have somebody who is a couple of months pregnant, they're 3 or 4 months pregnant, and they've been going through their own journey with perhaps one of their children who has now been diagnosed as neurodivergent, and it's got them thinking about their own neural pathway and the way that their brain operating system works, and they've started to think, perhaps that's something that's a bit similar for me, but they haven't gone down the diagnosis route, they haven't got an assessment, there's a very big waiting list to see the GP, and they've looked at this session today and thought, well, I've never considered myself to be disabled, and I don't know how I fit within this, and I'm very concerned that the NHS is under a lot of pressure. Perhaps I shouldn't say anything. Is there really any reason why I should mention anything about needing reasonable adjustments? Is there some last piece of advice or recommendation that you would give to a person who is perhaps sat in that position? Because I feel that many women and birthing people may have been or will be in that position in the years to come.
Well, I think we only get to do every pregnancy and birth once, and you deserve to have the very best care and support throughout each and every one, as you as a person evolve through your lifetime of perhaps having more than one child potentially. And whilst I don't think the responsibility for improving maternity services should rest with women and birthing people, sadly we are in a system where sometimes you have to push for and ask for the thing that you really want and need for it to happen. And the more people that do that, the more the system needs to bend and change to meet the needs of women and birthing people. When I first started working as a midwife, it was unheard of for anybody with any risk factors to be facilitated to birth on the midwifery-led birthing unit. Now that happens, and there are processes in place to make sure that somebody who maybe falls outside the criteria can be supported in their choices. And that's happened as a result of women and birthing people coming forward and saying, this is what I need, and you need to provide it. And organisations like Neurodivergent Birth, like Birth Rights, like Make Birth Better, all being out there kind of saying, these are the things that need to change to support women and birthing people. And so I think it's only for that woman or birthing person to decide what's right for them. I think that each of us have to make our own choices about whether we want to ask for our needs to be met in that way. But you are legally entitled to be supported with reasonable adjustments, and you deserve that same level of care and support, whether there's a diagnostic label attached to your health record or not, but it's about what's going to be most supportive for you as an individual. And only, each and every one of us can only ever make that decision for ourselves. But I think that's, yeah, how I would answer that.
Thank you, Beth. What a fantastic end to this absolutely amazing session. You've given us such a foundation of law and information, but also I hope that I speak for everybody on the call or listening later to say, and you're leaving us with hope that things do evolve, things do get better as we learn more, we change, and there's a lot of hope for the future there. So thank you so much. Huge thank you to everyone else for coming today. Thank you for being on this session. If you're listening later, thank you for taking the time to listen and to think about this and just engaging with us at Neurodivergent Birth. We're having a phenomenal week, making new connections, listening to new conversations and learning so much from our brilliant speakers. If you have time in the next couple of days, we've got some excellent speakers tomorrow and Friday as well. Lots happening in trusts and units around the country, which we'll be sharing on Instagram. Tomorrow there's a great session on accessibility in hypnobirthing, and we've later on in the afternoon got Ruby talking about navigating neurodivergence and race in the birth space. So please do come along to those or tune in later on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll end that now, and I hope you all have a great rest of day. But the biggest thanks of all to you, Beth. Phenomenal, as always, and it was just a pleasure to hear from you, and I learn every time I hear you speak.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.